Ms. Blair, what did you do to Stony Blair that made you guilty of premeditated murder?
She my son. I intentionally killed her. I assaulted her every time he told me what she did to him. By assault, I mean I punched her. I put a bag over her head until she lost consciousness. I threw hot water on her, scalding hot water from the faucet.
Why did you take the decision to pile the bodies on top of each other in a freezer?
What do you mean?
Why did you do that?
Well, I only had one deep freezer. You mean take the decision to pile the bodies on top of each other? Where's she gonna go?
A parent is supposed to be a safe space for their children, a place where they can come to for love, care, and protection, a place where they would always have a listening ear, a warm hug, and understanding. But for Mitchelle Blair, that was not it at all. Her children did not find love and care. Her children found their worst nightmare.
You meant to kill her?
I definitely meant to kill her.
Okay. It wasn't an accident?
No, not at all. If I had a chance to do it again, I would.
On March 24, 2015, a moving crew made their way to the Martin Luther King Apartments in the 800 block of St. Aubin Street in the city of Detroit. That address belonged to Mitchelle Blair, a 37-year-old single mother to Gabby, Stony, Stephen, and the youngest boy. Before that day, Mitchelle had received an eviction notice after having been unable to pay her rent. Mitchelle had hit tough times and wasn't able to afford her rent for that month. She had reached out to family members, begging to be loaned some money for rent, but no one was willing to help her. You see, this had not been Mitchelle's first time asking her family for financial help, and they were tired of it. They had begged her to get a job so she could keep a roof over her children's heads and provide for them. But Mitchelle was unable to keep a job, and she was always fired from any job she got shortly after beginning. Mitchelle had also developed an alcohol problem. She spent most of her days drunk, which contributed to her struggle to hold down a job. But eventually, Mitchelle began to dabble in more than just alcohol, and her poor decisions started to take a toll on her family.
My mom had a few odd jobs here and there, but after a certain point, she just never went back. My mom started using the money that was meant for us to eat our food for drugs and alcohol.
At this point, Mitchelle's family members were tired of bailing her out all the time, so they decided to tell her they were done and she needed to get a job for good this time, or go back to school and finish her degree so she could have better employment opportunities. But Mitchelle was not listening to her family, just like she hadn't listened in the past. Her sole focus was on getting the money she needed for rent. Mitchelle was desperate. If she didn't get the rent, she would be evicted from the home she shared with her children. And with nowhere else to go, that wasn't really an option. But that wasn't all. There was another reason. Mitchelle was desperate to get her hands on some money for rent. She had a dark secret that lay within the walls of that house. That secret that could not stay hidden if she was evicted from her house. Dark secrets that would soon make their way to light. However, Mitchelle was unable to pay the rent. So as she had been warned, a moving crew from the 36th District Court arrived at her door to evict her. Except when the moving crew got there, Mitchelle was nowhere to be found. Neither were her kids, and the house was empty. It was supposed to be a simple eviction, as the apartment was not that big, and Mitchelle wasn't there to give them trouble. But as authorities scoured Mitchelle Blair's house, what they found would send shockwaves through the city of Detroit.
My mom got in an eviction notice in the mail. My mom had to pay rent, and she owed a certain amount of money, so we were being evicted. And she read it, she started panicking. The eviction letter meant to her that this whole thing was over.
The officers got to work taking out Mitchelle's properties from the house. They started by moving the furniture out. Mitchelle didn't really have a lot of furniture in the apartment, so they got the couch and table out first, before attempting to get out other items in the living room. What they removed next wasn't furniture, and it would send ripples of fear through the community. In the living room where it appeared the family spent most of their time, the moving crew came across a white, deep freezer. They proceeded to lift the top of the freezer in an attempt to check if there was anything in it before moving it outside. What they found when they opened the freezer chilled the crew to their bones. In the fridge, they discovered a blanket. In the blanket, they discovered a human body. The crew immediately put the top back and called the authorities. When the authorities got to the Blair house, they made yet another horrific discovery. Another body wrapped in a blanket underneath the previous body. A neighbor didn't waste any time telling the authorities exactly where to find Mitchelle Blair. Authorities found her at another neighbor's house with her 2 children, but her other children, Stephen Gage Berry and Stony Ann Blair, were missing. After some brief questioning, Mitchelle Blair was placed under arrest.
Well, tonight we begin with that breaking news, a horrific discovery. 2 children found dead, their bodies stuffed in a freezer.
We have new video just in showing the mother, 35-year-old Mitchelle Blair, being arrested by Detroit police, her hands cuffed behind her back. What could have led to such a tragic end for these two young lives?
The authorities immediately began an investigation into the horrors that took place at the Blair house. The bodies recovered had been frozen when they were found, so the authorities could not identify who they were. But they didn't have long to wait before they were offered a confession. Mitchelle Blair confessed to taking the lives of her two children, Stony and Stephen.
We begin with breaking news surrounding a heart-wrenching story. A mother has confessed to killing her two children and stuffing their bodies in a freezer.
Police found the bodies today after they'd been stashed there for over a year.
Meanwhile, authorities took the bodies to a morgue to thaw for 3 days so an autopsy could be performed. The medical examiner ruled their deaths homicides and determined that they had been in the freezer for at least a couple of years. Although Mitchell had confessed, the authorities still had to carry out an investigation to determine the full details of what happened at the Martin Luther King apartments, so they could paint a picture of the horror the children had experienced at the hands of their mother.
This mother of four had been given notice that she was going to be evicted from her townhouse today, but get this, there could be a lot more to this. After her kids were discovered in the freezer here and before this mother was arrested, she told a friend that her son had been assaulted, apparently by his siblings. So was this some sort of sordid discipline for the kids?
But as the investigation progressed, the authorities uncovered shocking details that exposed a series of neglect and torture. These details rocked an entire community, causing everyone to ponder the question, what if the very people we trust to build our dreams provide visions for a nightmare?
My mom became obsessed with this crazy notion that my siblings had actually assaulted our youngest brother.
Mitchelle Blair confessed in detail why she froze her two babies to death. In August 2012, Mitchell claimed she came home to a rather disturbing image. Her youngest child, a boy, had been using his doll to simulate a rather disturbing activity, one that he was way too young to know about. She was immediately angry.
She started basically interrogating the youngest. Stephen had been bullying our youngest brother.
Mitchelle Blair's youngest child was very young at the time, and in the face of intense interrogation that he could not understand, he likely just wanted it to stop. So when his mother offered him the name of his brother, who had bullied him on occasion, the little boy took it.
And she asked the youngest, did Stephen do this to you? She kept asking and just repeating it over and over again until the youngest finally said yes.
It's worth knowing that there is no actual evidence that Stephen, who was 9 years old at the time, had harmed his younger brother. Though his siblings had seen him bully the youngest, none of them had witnessed something so disturbing. But none of that mattered to Mitchell. All she needed was for the youngest to admit that his brother had harmed him. You see, years ago, when Mitchell herself was a little girl growing up, she had experienced horrific things at the hands of her mom's friend. After it had gone on for so long, Mitchell finally worked up the courage to tell her mother the truth of what she'd been suffering in silence. Mitchell, like any other child would, expected to be comforted. Then she expected her mom to do something to make it stop. But her mom's response was so shocking that even decades later, it would ring in her memory like the day she heard it.
I told my mother what happened to me, and the only thing she said was, it's over with, so what the you want me to do about it? What do you mean what I want you to do?
That response marked Mitchell's life forever. So when her youngest admitted to the same thing being done to him by his brother, Mitchell was transported right back to where she was decades ago. And unlike her mother, she decided to do something about it. Except in this case, the boy being accused of harm by her youngest child was her son too. Mitchell turned her focus to Stephen, her 9-year-old son, who had just been accused of doing something horrible by his brother. Over the next couple of hours, Mitchell interrogated Stephen, urging him to tell her what she now believed to be the truth. Stephen, who was just hearing those things for the first time, couldn't. He maintained his innocence and insisted he had not done anything like that to his little brother. But his mother did not believe him. Over the next couple of weeks, Mitchell put Stephen through the kind of horror that would send fear coursing through the veins of the most hardened of criminals.
Throughout most of that week or two, he was alone. She had him isolated. She used trash bags to asphyxiate him. She denied him food.
After days of being physically and mentally hurt at the hands of his mother, Stephen had no choice but to confess. He had thought the pain would stop if he said what his mother wanted to hear. Little did he know that the house of horror his mother had turned his home to was just beginning.
The following day and days, weeks, they somewhat run all together into one, but The only thing that remained constant was his abuse and how severe it got.
In Mitchell's mind, she was dishing out the appropriate punishment for what she believed Stephen had done to his younger brother. To her, she needed to do that to teach Stephen a lesson. At this point, Stephen's siblings lived in fear of their mom. They wanted so badly for it to stop, but they were afraid of what their mom might do if they ever said anything, so they just kept quiet. Plus, they had grown up in that house being treated very badly by their mom. It had happened so frequently that it had become normal to them. They had hoped once Mitchell was done teaching him a lesson, she would stop and let Stephen go. She never did. After 2 weeks of torture, Stephen succumbed to his injuries on August 30th, 2012. His siblings had to watch him die. But as shocked as they were by what their mother had done to Stephen, they were even more shocked by what she did next. Mitchell's oldest daughter, Gabby, wasn't allowed to watch on the sidelines. Her mom asked her to do the unthinkable.
After Stephen passed, she had a bed cover and she wrapped him in it. And then had me help her take him down the stairs.
Gabby was in tears as she helped her mom move her brother's body. She had no idea where they were taking him, but she soon found out.
I didn't know that we would be putting Stephen in the freezer until my mom told me to open it for her.
Mitchell Blair set her son's body down in the deep freezer. Mitchell's children who were still alive had to leave with the horrible secret of what their mother had done. But that wasn't the end of it.
Trying to live knowing that my brother is in the freezer was terrifying. I made sure to watch what I said around her. I already knew that one misstep and this is where I'll end up.
Mitchell had committed the crime. Now she needed to get away with it, and the only thing standing between that were her children.
What she would do is drill us over our cover story. We would have to say that he was at our aunt's house or he was at his dad's house.
Mitchell lined her children up every morning and made them rehearse the cover story. And if they even sounded like they hesitated to give their cover story, she would look them straight in the eye, and she would make threats that would send chills throughout their entire bodies.
But 9 months later, something set my mom off again.
After Stephen passed away, Mitchell calmed down, and it looked like the worst was behind them, and they might return not spending every day absolutely terrified of making the wrong move for fear of what their mother would do to them. But the worst was far from over in the Blair household. In fact, it was about to turn its sights on another little child.
And she started asking my youngest brother if Stony had ever assaulted him.
And just like the previous time, the little boy said no. He told his mom countless times that Stony had done nothing to him, but Mitchell did not believe him, and she started to get agitated.
Just like last time, my youngest brother said no. My mom started to get aggressive, and she threatened to beat him if he didn't tell her the truth.
The little boy was scared of what would happen to him if he didn't tell his mom what she wanted him to tell her, so he had no choice.
He said yes.
The full wrath of Mitchell Blair turned once again on her child, this time her 13-year-old daughter, Stony Blair. Stony told her mom several times that she had not done anything to hurt her little brother, but Mitchell was past caring.
My mom just went full feral. She just started wailing on her.
And just like last time, Mitchell Blair unleashed horror on Stony, torturing her over the next few weeks.
I didn't know what to do. I was just afraid. I know the gravity of the situation, and this is the second time it's happened, but I just felt helpless, like there was nothing I could do to change or stop it.
She starved Stony and brutally hurt her, and while she was barely breathing, Mitchell did something so horrible it would rock everyone to their core.
At this point, Stony is barely conscious. She picks her up and tells me to grab Stony's legs. I didn't want to, but I had to. I couldn't say no. My mom and I put Stony in the freezer on top of Stephen.
But it didn't end there. Little Stony was trying to fight for her life.
After putting her in the freezer, my mom saw that Stony was still trying to breathe. And my mom grabbed the plastic bag and then put it over her face and held her nose while she was still in the freezer to speed it up.
Mitchell then forced her oldest daughter to watch something so disturbing it left her with nightmares for a very long time.
And then Mom let it go, and she said, you know what, you're as good as gone anyway.
Mitchelle Blair had frozen her daughter to death, piled her on top of her brother in the freezer, and continued living in the home as if nothing had happened. Stephen Gage Barry and Stony Ann Blair were in the deep freezer for almost 3 years, and no one looked for them. They had absentee fathers, and Mitchell had previously taken them out of school. She told school officials that she was going to teach them at home. When neighbors asked about the children's whereabouts, she always had an excuse. But Mitchell's carefully planned out plan to get away with the murder of her babies. But on March 24, 2015, when that eviction notice came, her walls came crashing down around her. Mitchelle Blair was arrested and arraigned in court. She confessed to the murders again at the Wayne County Circuit Court.
I assaulted her every time he told me what she did to him. By assault, I mean I punched her. I had put a bag over her head till she lost consciousness. I threw hot water on her, scalding hot water from the faucet.
She told Judge Dana Hathaway that she killed her demons after finding out they were hurting her youngest son, a claim that has never been substantiated. She was going to turn herself in to the police, she said. But when her youngest son told her that he didn't want her to go, she made other arrangements. Blair told the judge that she did not feel any remorse over her actions.
You meant to kill her?
I definitely meant to kill her.
It wasn't an accident?
No, not at all. If I had a chance to do it again, I would.
The prosecution's office stated that they found no evidence of Stephen and Stoney hurting their brother like Mitchell claimed. A county circuit judge terminated Mitchelle Blair's parental rights of the surviving children, and Child Protective Services saw to it that the children were put up for adoption. Mitchell pleaded guilty in June 2015 to 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder and is now serving a life sentence at the Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Michigan without the possibility of parole. Hey, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you know of other similar cases? Let me know in a comment, and before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. See you next time, and stay safe.